Hello and welcome to the CRM MVP podcast, episode number 57. In this episode, I wanted to talk about some of the things that I've been seeing on the last few months from customers that I've been working with, and also from events I've attended and sessions I've delivered. I just keep hearing the same comments. I also see them online and at the community, and I see it at the the forums and whatnot and Twitter. And we have these features in Dynamics 365, these sets of functionalities that kind of keep coming back or keep coming up in terms of, people using them and the insecurity around using them. Whether, am I doing this right? Should I be using this thing? Should I look into switching to, a replacement to this functionality, whatever that is. So I figure I would put together a list of the top 10 things you need to replace in Dynamics 365. And once again, these are features that I consider to be either misused by most organizations, or they are being used correctly, but they have their days counted as far as I'm concerned. So once again, this list is 10 things that I thought of, that you need to reconsider your life choices, essentially, or your CRM choices, essentially, when it comes to this functionality, because I think that you should be more proactive rather than reactive when it comes to the functionality that you spend so much money and time to implement, right? Especially if you're fully adopted. So some of these, if you're fully adopted, if they're part of your workflow, if they're part of what you do, if all your users are leveraging these, this is gonna be it's gonna be a tough job to replace some of this stuff. And I fully expect that some of you are going to disagree with these on the list. Of course, it wouldn't be the CRM MVP podcast if you all just agree with me on everything. I think that if I had the opportunity to interview other experts and MVPs, they would probably agree with half my list and disagree with the other half. But these are, again, my opinion. This is what I think people out there should be looking for or looking at when it comes to their own implementation. So these are not in any particular order. The number one is not more important than number 10. So let's just get after it. So number one thing that you need to reconsider how you're leveraging them or using them in Dynamics 365. Most organizations use this wrong, and perhaps you should replace it and use something else instead, is leads, right? The leads entity, which is an out-of-the-box entity or record type that comes with the primary sales app for Dynamics 365. I think that most organizations are using leads just because it's there. I don't think that organizations are really taking the time to identify how leads could help them on their process. And we all understand that Dynamics 365 is a tool, it's a solution that we should leverage when it comes to customer acquisition, when it comes to helping us acquire customers. And obviously leads is part of that for a lot of organizations. There are some organizations that are using leads that don't really need it, So for example, let's say if you sell products to schools, right? To public schools and private schools. Like, these are if this is something you sell, let's say paper or something like that. If this is something that they buy, that public schools need this thing and they're buying from other companies, they're not leads, right? In my opinion, leads are records, meaning companies or people that you are not really sure if they buy what you're selling. You don't know if what they want is something you can sell, or you don't know if they are a person or a company that you want to do business with. When we don't know mutually if this is going to be a good fit, you don't want to invest too much time in going into a sales process, and go visit them on site if that's part of your process, and put together a prototype, whatever it is that you do. Now, you don't want to get too far before you know that this is not something that you want to pursue. Leads could be, and that is kind of in all capital letters, could be a good solution for it. Why? Because leads are a temporary record. They're meant to be a temporary record. These are records that we put in the system. We call them with the sole purpose of qualifying them, meaning identify if this is something that we want to pursue, if it makes sense or not, and then we either qualify or disqualify them. But like I mentioned, if you're in a business that you know that when you call an organization, they use what you sell. If you sell latex gloves for hospitals, for example, you know that all hospitals use latex gloves. So a hospital is not a lead. They are a prospect. You know them. You can put them in the system as an account. You can use that field that is included with the account entity called relationship type and give them a prospect, relationship type. But you don't need leads. You don't need to qualify them. They're qualified just because they're already a hospital, right? So for me, when I architect solutions, when I, essentially implement this thing for organizations, my initial thought is never, let's use leads. It's always, why would I need to use leads? It's always, can we do it with an account relationship to say that this account is a prospect or a suspect, rather than using one more entity that now I have to deal with, I have to worry about, right? When you use the leads, now you have to deal with the qualifying and disqualifying process and all the automation that goes with that as well, right? Because you don't want to just implement leads and then not add any automation to the process, right? You want to add things like, what happens if we put in a lead and we don't contact them for a week or for 3 days? Should we do something about it? Should we email the salesperson the lead is assigned to? Should we email their manager? Because the idea behind entering leads into a system is that you stay on top of them. And I know that some other companies use it differently. Like I said, it's on a case-by-case basis, right? If you spend a bunch of money on a list of prospects that you don't really know if they buy what you sell, I think that using the leads entity could be a really good use for that entity, right? That's the way it's supposed to be. Import all those leads into the system. Maybe you bought 1,000 names of CEOs or whatever it is, and now you're going to start calling them and qualifying them essentially to see if this is something that you want to take further. That makes sense. That's what leads are for. But I think that a lot of organizations use it incorrectly. I think that you have to deal, with the automation side. You have to deal with the security side. You have to deal with the data duplication side of things where, maybe you have an account and a contact already in the system for a lead that you enter in the system. And obviously those are pretty clear cut, right? You enter a person that works for a company. You already have them as a contact and an account. Boom, you can use duplicate detection for that. But how do you deal with a person that maybe it's not in the system as a contact, but they work for an account that is already a duplicate in the system, but maybe has an extra dash or whatever it is? Identifying duplicate accounts is pretty tough unless you do it with with something that is unique, like the website or something. But the website is rarely a required field, which means that most people are going to enter the name of the account and call it a day. And if they enter Coca-Cola all in one word versus Coca-Cola with a space between the two words, then now you're stuck with duplicate records and contacts that are not aligned. And yes, you can then merge it, but you know what I'm saying? It's introducing more complexity than what you need. If you only use accounts and leverage that relationship, type, that takes care of it, I think, for most organizations. So if you're using leads today, then I think that you need to look back and see if you really, really need leads. Obviously, if you implement the leads already and you have all this automation, if you already did all the work to make them work for you, then keep them. I think that you should, just keep what you have. I don't necessarily think you need to replace them if they're already working for you. But if you're in the process of implementing them, and especially if all they're doing is just holding data there, but you're not really using leads the way they're supposed to be used, then I think you should replace it. I think that you should move things around and do the work to eliminate the need for leads. So that's number one on the list. And I noticed that we're about 9 minutes in and we're on number one. So let's move along. Number two, and this one is another one that I think, in Dynamics 365, there's not a whole lot of things or features or functionality in Dynamics that we can really customize to what we need. If you look at, let's just pick something else to step away from leads for a second or from sales altogether. Let's pick cases, right? So if you want to use the customer service functionality and you pick the case entity, you can customize a lot of it. You can customize a lot of cases to hold all kinds of stuff, right? Remove the things you don't need, add some things that you need, maybe customize the business process flow to follow the process that you follow. Maybe it's one with branching where if the customer requires a refund, it will add another branch so a manager has to approve the refund. Whatever it is, you can customize a lot of it, right? But when it comes to the product catalog, quoting, orders, like that piece of functionality, man, it's just really tough to work with it. And I think that if you ask a lot of experts, MVPs, etc., about how many projects do they do where they use the out-of-the-box product catalog functionality, I think the vast majority will say it's a very minimum amount. Now, when you ask those same people what percentage of projects they do where they actually use a product catalog, quote unquote, or they use a quoting functionality, I think the percentage will be a lot higher. They're just using third-party solutions or custom solutions, right? You can do configurable price quote, whatever it is. You can use these solutions out there to have your own third-party quoting solution, but you can also create your own from scratch. And we talked about this extensively on episode 53, which was about, whether we should use the out-of-the-box functionality or create our own and save the money in licensing, because you will no longer be using the Microsoft intellectual property, right, which is the sales application, which comes with the product catalog and quoting and all that stuff. So how flexible is the product catalog and quoting and all that quoting functionality in Dynamics? Not a whole lot. Yes, you can add fields to the quotes entity and to the order entity and even the product entity. But a lot of that stuff, it kind of just works the way it is. You need to use units. You need to use unit groups. You need to use price list items. There's a lot of things that are kind of forced down your throat, right? There's no way around it. You have to do it. And there are some things that I still don't understand why we're unable to do. Take the product family, for example. If you've used this, you know what I'm talking about. Product families are a great addition to the product catalog. It came a couple years ago. The product catalog has been around for a long time. But a couple years ago, I think it was maybe in 2016 or so, the product catalog got kind of revamped. It was like pimped out, if you will, right? They added a lot of functionality to it. One of those things was product families, which was cool. The ability to relate multiple products together and add some properties, I think it's called. And you can say, okay, all these devices share the same things except for memory. Let's just pick iPads, for example. Okay, we sell 4 types of iPads. They all have the same screen size, same warranty, same manufacturer, all that stuff. But we sell it in different, storage capabilities. Maybe we sell it in different colors. Those could be categories that you then select. So you say, I want to add an iPad, and then you just have to pick the color and the storage and call it a day. That's it. Everything else kind of comes along with it. So the ability to track product families together and the ability to be able to say, if you're selling cars, for example, what are your sports cars and pickup trucks and sedans and whatnot, and be able to track sales by the different families. Like give me a breakdown of sales by product family. That's awesome. It's awesome in principle. But once you have your product catalog populated, you cannot create product families with those products. How backwards is that? That's just insane to me. It just makes no sense at all that I have to create the families before I can add the products. If you added the products, you're too late. You can't do it anymore. Why? Right? So that functionality, to me, it's kind of, not really a piece of functionality I can use, because I would have to re-implement everything. So every single customer out there using product catalogs in CRM 2011 or 2013 or 2015, right, that dare to use the out-of-the-box Dynamics 365, it's pretty much unable to leverage all these new features because they have to re-implement something they already implemented on the first place. So the lack of flexibility with the product catalog is something that I can never get over. If I work in a project where the customer needs exactly what the product catalog does, like exactly, I don't have to customize anything, this is what you need, then I'll do it. Okay, I'll use the product catalog. But if you're having to change your ways, the way your company operates, the way you sell products, the way you do things, I just don't think it's worth it. And I think you should replace it. So that's my point of view on the product catalog. Number 3, it's sharing records. I think it's a big mistake. I try to stay away from sharing as much as possible. For a variety of reasons. I think number 1 is, well, I think that you should have an open system for the most part. And I talked about this on episode 19, the episode about setting up security like an MVP. I'm a big proponent of open systems. Open not in a way that can damage the data. Open in terms of clarity and visibility. That's what I'm talking about. So read permissions for everybody. Everyone can see everything. In the vast majority of companies that I've worked with, the idea of keeping data hidden from each other is more of a convenience thing than a requirements thing. Like, I don't want them to see my leads. Well, why not? Well, because they don't need to. Okay, but that's a convenience thing. It's not a requirements thing, right? So for the most part, I guarantee you that every implementation you do, it's just more of a convenience thing to not show the data than to show the data. So because of that, I personally see a lot of value on openness, on being able to see that some other division in my company or perhaps some other city, if we're a countrywide organization or whatever, I see the value on being able to see that, check this out. We've done business with them in California. That's awesome. That's something that can help me win, right? If I'm trying to procure business from an organization that is here in Georgia where I live, and I realize that we've done business with their office in California, and they happen to be considering me on top of 3 other vendors or 2 other vendors or whatever it is, and I happen to be one of the finalists, do you think that knowing that we've done business with them and they're happy with our business in California is going to help me or hurt me? Right? Being ignorant to the fact that we've done business with them in another division or in another city or in another capacity would only help me. It would only help my clarity, even if we didn't do a good job. Even if, I go back and I realize that, this was a project that we totally botched. That we delivered this product and they were unhappy with it. Even knowing that, at least will help me understand what kind of sales process I'm in. So I'm huge into, let's keep this open as much as possible. Can we restrict write? Absolutely. Delete? Obviously, no questions asked. Remove delete. Nobody can delete anything, right? Big proponent of that. You know that. You listen to episode 19. But read, be able to see stuff, it just doesn't make any sense to block it in the vast majority of cases. Like 99% of cases, it doesn't make sense. For, I guess, reasons of user experience, I think, for convenience reasons, as I mentioned earlier, I think that leaving it open so you can find the information, but setting up views that can filter out the data by default, because that's most of the work that you're going to be doing, I think that makes sense. But I don't think that creating a bunch of business units and whatnot, it's going to help you. I just don't see the benefit on it. And again, I'm open to talking to you guys about that. So sharing records, meaning keeping it locked down and then requiring users to share the records with each other so they can see it and work together on things, it's counterproductive. Number 1 is inconvenient. So if we're talking about that convenience reason of, securing everything and preventing read from everything to make it more convenient, you're not making it convenient because now you're asking people to share stuff and ask each other questions like, hey, has anybody worked with this company anywhere? Right? That's very inconvenient. And number 2, slows down the system. Why? Because sharing, 2 things again. Number 1, sharing entries are collected on a table in SQL and they're never gone, pretty much. So the table only grows. It never just gets smaller and thin and awesome and super performing. That never happens, number 1. So the list of records in this table, the POA table, is just going to continue to grow forever and ever and ever. And the entries are literally, this record is shared with this person with these permissions. Like, that's what the entries are. Now, here's the problem with that. By default, relationship behavior between entities in Dynamics 365 replicates anything that happens to a parent record to the child records. So if you share an account, every single opportunity, contact, appointments, you name it, by default is shared too, right? But you don't even see that. And I talked about this in previous episodes, which I called ghost sharing, right? The records are shared with the users that you share the account with, but if you go to the individual opportunities and contacts and whatnot that the other users can now see because sharing was replicated across the board, if you click on share, you won't see them there. They don't show up on the list of people that this record is being shared with. They were shared by relationship behavior. They were shared by the system, and they are invisible to everybody, to administrators. You can't see that. But they're not invisible on the table. They're entries on the table. So if an account has, let's just say, activities, contacts, opportunities, won and lost, cases, all that. Let's say they have 10,000 records connected to it, right? They've been a customer for 5 years, and every single email we've sent, appointment, phone call, etc., 10,000 records. Sharing that one account with one person will add 10,000 lines to the POA table, right? So how is that helping you with performance? It's killing it, right? So I prefer you leave it open, give people less excuses to share stuff. I actually remove the share button away. I don't want them to share anything, right? Now, I realize that doesn't work in every project. You might say, because even though they can read it, I need to be able to allow people to give people right permissions maybe so they can make adjustments on an opportunity or whatever. I get that. Sometimes you need to leave the button there. But for the most part, I just don't see a reason for it. I get rid of it on the permissions, on the security roles. Get rid of sharing. Maybe that's one of the roles that I peppered, and again, going back to episode 19, and give out to a couple of people. They can now share records. But I don't want to just leave it there and train people as a best practice, which is what a lot of companies do. They train them as a best practice of, go in there and share your stuff with everybody. Like, we make sure they can see it. So if you want them to see it, you can share it. And once you're unhappy or whatever, you want to get rid of it, go ahead and unshare it. How is that more convenient for users? So let's go down the list. It's more inconvenient. It makes the system slower, and it can potentially share thousands of records without you wanting to, and you can't really see those. I mean, there's no plus to it, as far as I can tell. So sharing, number 3 on the list, just stop it. Right? Replace it. Find something else for it. Access teams will be a good solution, but just opening it up. Open the floodgates. Read organization level for everybody, right? Yes, radical like that. Number 4 on the list of top 10 things you need to replace in Dynamics 365 is the classic interface. So many customers still using the classic interface, right? I don't know if you guys missed this, but the classic interface will be gone within the next year, pretty much. Within the next year and a half, I would say. Right, so Microsoft has announced that by October, they are officially deprecating the classic interface, October of 2019, depending on when you're hearing this. This will be in the past or maybe in the future, but October, which is only 3 months away, right, will be the end of the classic interface. Now, it will be still supported, meaning Dynamics will still display it for at least another year. But come October 2020, it might be gone forever. How many of you out there that use that CRM 2011, let's just say, or CRM 4, CRM 2011, are still using the classic forms before the new forms that are now the classic forms? Nobody, right? They were gone. They were supported in CRM 2013. Then CRM 2015, I think you can still kind of see them. But by CRM 2016, they were gone. They just didn't work at all. Gone. So do you want to be proactive and start transferring everything to the unified interface, which is, by the way, the Dynamics 365 interface now? Or are you going to wait until they take it off so then you can complain that you didn't get enough notice? I'm trying to help you out, of course. Again, these are things that you need to replace. Look hard at your functionality, and I'm already telling you that this is time and money you're going to have to spend, whether you want it or not. You can wait. Wait till 2020 and see what happens. See if Microsoft extends it. Maybe they'll extend to 2021. But you're going to have to do it. by 2020 or 20, whatever it is, this is something you're going to have to do. So prepare for it. Prepare for it. If you can get it done before October, even better. Reach out to your partner, whatever partner you're working with, or if you're doing it yourself, do your research, prepare for it, and transfer to the new interface. Make sure all your scripting works. Make sure that, that those ISV solutions that drop iframes on the classic interface for no reason other than to slow down your system and save you a click, right? Make sure that those things are now working on the unified interface. There are things that even Microsoft put out that just don't work on the unified interface. Just flat out don't work. So prepare for it. Because I know that some of you might be saying but, I have a form, the account form, opportunity form, whatever. I looked at it on the Sales Hub, which is the unified interface, and they look fine. They look like my form. Yes, if you have regular fields, the transition will be easy, right? If you're using Dynamics 365 out of the box, this is a non-issue to you. All you have to do is create a model-driven app that is the unified interface, transfer all your entities, all your dashboards, all your charts and views, and your sitemap, and you're good to go. Boom, you did it. One day, 24 hours, you transfer to the new interface. High five. Done. But how many of you are using out-of-the-box functionality, just out-of-the-box fields, and no customizations whatsoever? Not many, right? A lot of people customize the forms. A lot of people, tweak some things. Added a chart here and there. At the very least, you should spend a few days testing to make sure everything looks good. Because if you embedded an out-of-the-box chart, right, and now you go to the unified interface, does that look the way you want it to look? Charts look a little bit differently on the unified interface. So you have to spend some time looking at the stuff, making sure everything works. And if you have one of those massive implementations, even if you're not using a whole lot of customizations, which I applaud you for, you know how much against customizations I am, right? In terms of coding, extensions, let's just say. You still have to test it. You still have to walk through it. So if you have a sandbox environment, which I hope you do, I would say start working on that. Don't wait till October 2020. Just get it done. All right, number 5 is reports. Man, it still kills me to see people leveraging the old school reports they put together in CRM 2011 or whatever it was. Yes, we didn't have, and actually before 2011, we didn't have dashboards to begin with. We were relying 100% in reports, but now we have Power BI. And it's included on your license. There's really no excuse to not go back and look at reports and at least question if that's still the best way to do it. I'm working with customers right now that run reports that take 30 seconds, 1 minute, 4 minutes to run. Why? There's no need for it. Not anymore, at least, in a lot of cases. The funny thing is that sometimes I engage with these customers and I say, okay, guys, it's time for us to look back at the reports and figure out if there's a better way to gather the same level of business intelligence, the same level of reporting or data, however you want to see insight, right, from the data. And it's funny because they'll have 20 reports, and then after we have a conversation of a couple hours, they realize they're only using 3 of them. The other 17 were created, 7 years ago, and I don't even remember the last time we used this report. So just by looking at replacing them, you may realize that most of your reports you don't actually need at all. They're just there for no reason, right? So I think SQL reports or SQL-based or Fetch XML reports need to be replaced. Take a look at it. They've been around for a long time. There's new ways of doing things. Just be proactive about it. Right? Do I think Microsoft is going to remove supports for reports or deprecate reporting? No, of course not. I don't think that's going to happen. But there's just no gain from it. There's no advantage to it. All right, number 6. For those of you using server-side sync, good job, right? But if you're using folder-level synchronization, I think you should move away from that. And I know the vast majority of people are not using this functionality. Some people are scared of it for some reason. They don't think it's ready. They don't think that, it does what it's supposed to do, or that if you get millions of emails, it's going to clog up, your environment, which might be true. I haven't done an implementation where the users get so many emails that it fails. It makes folder level sync fails. But I can see the hesitation for it. but a lot of different companies out there are using it. They're using folder level sync. So I don't know if you've noticed, but Microsoft has a setting called Track to Dynamics 365 category that you can enable, right? And essentially, and here's what I'm going to do. If you go back, I'm recording this before I actually record this tip, but by the time the episode comes out, it will be live. If you look at our YouTube channel, just go to YouTube and type CRM MVP Media, right? We have a series going on called 2-Minute Tuesday. The 2-Minute Tuesday number 78, which is coming out next week, will be about how to enable this. So if you want to learn how to do it step by step, go check it out. So again, 2-Minute Tuesday number 78 will be about that. But by using a tool, which I featured before on the series, on the 2-Minute Tuesday series, which by the way, you should subscribe to if you haven't done that already, we can enable tracking to Dynamics 365 by switching a category, right? And essentially the way it does it is it adds a category to Outlook, just like the other categories that have colors and stuff. I think this one is black or dark gray or something like that. That is called Track to Dynamics 365. That's what the category is called. And you can track emails, you can track appointments, you can track tasks. So essentially all the records that you can normally track into Dynamics 365 from Exchange or from Outlook. And all you have to do is place that category on the item. And as you know, you can place multiple categories on items. So you can still use your other colors and just on top of that, add the Track to Dynamics 365 category to those items. And then they will be tracked. You can do this in bulk, by the way, which is pretty awesome. So sometimes you find people that say, oh, well, I have all these contacts and I want to track them in bulk. How do I do it? Well, if you enable this thing, all they have to do is add the category to those contacts and they will be automatically tracked by server-side sync. Now, I will say that Microsoft says that category-based tracking, which is this functionality I'm just telling you about, is not supported with the Dynamics 365 for Outlook client, that you should be using the app for Outlook instead. I haven't seen any issues with it, but if you have issues with it, they're not going to help you. That's what not supported means. So I just don't think they tested it. And because of that, they're not supporting it. But they flat out say on their website for category-based tracking, they say, we recommend that you do not enable the OrgDB settings track categorized items, which is that setting that you have to enable to make this work on a customer engagement organization set up to use Dynamics 365 for Outlook. I don't really know why. They don't say why. They just say it's not supported, don't enable it. But I haven't found any issues myself with it. I think it works quite well. Now, most of the implementations I've done that I'm using the track categorized items setting have been using the app for Outlook. I'm a big proponent of leveraging the app for Outlook. They already tried to kill the Dynamics 365 for Outlook client before, unsuccessfully in 2018, right? And they said that due to overwhelming feedback, we decided not to deprecate it. But will they pull it back next time? Or are we going to sit here and pretend that they're not going to try to deprecate this thing again? Really. We're going to sit here and pretend that they're going to continue to support two separate clients and that the team at Microsoft that is heavily working on the app for Outlook is cool with having a separate team working on the regular Outlook client. Come on. It's only a matter of time, right? We all know Microsoft. This is not NDA stuff. This is just common sense. So it's only a matter of time until the actual Outlook client is deprecated again. Will that time be forever? I don't know. We talked about it in a video, actually, in our YouTube channel about features that are hard to kill. And the Outlook client came up. Gustav had this suggestion to the list of features that are hard to kill, and that was the Outlook client. They've tried to kill it before, and that thing doesn't go away. But how long until this zombie feature, is alive? I mean, at some point, they're going to shoot it in the head, right? So I think that it's smart to try to implement and leverage the app for Outlook as much as possible. It continues to get better, and I think that will be the way we talk to Outlook in the future. So again, if you're using folder level sync, use category tracking instead. That's number 6. Number 7, dialogues. Well, you knew that, right? Dialogues were announced being deprecated. I think it was in 2017, maybe maybe 2018, maybe the beginning of 2018. So it is time for you to move away from it. What does deprecation mean? As you know, or probably don't know this, Microsoft deprecating tasks is a polite way of them saying, we're no longer going to work on this thing. We're no longer going to, introduce new features. We're no longer having a team of people behind, this feature and growing it and making it better. We're stopping right here. What you see is what you get. This is the end of the road. Now, what that means right now is that until the classic interface is supported, your dialogues will work. So if you have dialogues in the system, Microsoft announced their deprecation, you're like, who cares, right? They work. They didn't go away. Microsoft doesn't take features away. Typically, I think the last time they did it was 2012. They took an actual feature away. But for the most part, they deprecate stuff and they just leave them there. Like case in point, the standard SLAs from customer service. Like, why do we have standard SLAs? They're useless. Well, they're still in there, right? Or the previous knowledge base article database. It's still there. We have a new way of doing it through the unified interface, but we still have the old one, right? So they kind of deprecate things, again, to be polite, announcing that, this stuff is going to go away, so get ready. Well, I think that this one is connected to the classic interface going away. I think that once they pull the plug on the classic interface, which again, it's in my opinion 2020, then dialogues are really going to go away forever. So you need to be mindful of that. They already announced it. If you still have dialogues and you're, playing hard to beat on this one, I think that you need to be more proactive. So you are, hereby warned that this thing is going away. The Microsoft recommendation to replace dialogues is mobile task flows. And I've talked about mobile task flows I think we did an episode about features that I think are underutilized and people should use more. And this episode was about a year ago, I think. And, since then, I've been getting a lot deeper into Canvas apps. And now the Canvas apps are generally available. I think that Canvas apps might be a better solution for dialogues than mobile task flows. Now, mobile task flows are great. As I mentioned, I love it. I've used them since they came out. I remember doing presentations at Convergence about task flows when Convergence was still out there, maybe the last Convergence, about features that were brand new to Dynamics and not a whole lot of people knew about, and people were floored by how awesome task flows were. But now on the Power Apps world, I think Canvas apps are an even better way of doing it. So I would probably look at Canvas apps, whether that is embedded into a model-driven app or on its own. I will look at Canvas apps for a replacement of dialogues if I can. So take your time, because you still have some time with the classic interface, but hurry up. It's like, hurry up, but take your time. So just be mindful of the fact that they're going to go away forever. Right, so that's a good indication that you need to get in gear, and hopefully you've been taking notes. You probably are 3 or 4 items in, by now within this list of things that you need to look into and replacing. All right, number 8 is voice of the customer surveys, and I know that a lot of people weren't using this. I think this was also on that episode about features that are underutilized or under leverage within Dynamics 365, because I was a big fan of Voice of the Customer, but they're going away. Why? Because they're being replaced by Forms Pro. But Microsoft released, I think it was this week or maybe last week. I think it was last week when they released that as of July 1st of 2019, which just passed, right? The Voice of the Customer solution is deprecated. So this is brand new, hot off the press information. They also said that users can now create and distribute new surveys and collect responses from live surveys till July 1st of 2020. So if you're using Voice of the Customer, the stuff will work for 1 more year. Depending on when you're listening to this. If you're listening to this on June 28th of 2020, well, you gotta figure something out, because it's gonna go away. But on July 1st of 2020, they're going to pull the plug out. As you know, voice of the customer is backed up by Azure. So Azure is the one collecting all that stuff. Microsoft will pull the plug away from this. And what they're telling you to do is to use Forms Pro instead. Now, there may or may not be, I'm not really big into spoilers and telling you what's coming up. But don't be surprised if we have a brand new host coming up here pretty soon, going into detail with Forms Pro. So we'll see where that goes. Number 9 on the list is service scheduling. Service scheduling is one of those features, like we talked about on number 2 with the product catalog, that is not very flexible. It's one of those things that, like, what you see is what you get. Right? It works in one way. You can set up service activities. You can put on your resources, your services that you provide, time constraints based on their calendar and whatnot. And then it works pretty good. Like if you want to do exactly what he does, if you want to say, hey, I need to perform this oil change, next week, what do you have available? This thing, just with a click of a button, find me something. We'll find, a technician, a bay where you can bring your car, your truck to. Like it will work. And you can give it limitations too. You could say, I can only do it on Fridays. So show me availability on Fridays. Even if you have multiple locations, multiple people, whatever, it will go ahead and do it. But the service scheduling functionality, which a lot of companies are leveraging, like I did implementations. I can remember at least 5 implementations where I used the out-of-the-box service scheduling years ago in CRM 2013, etc., where they were leveraging it heavily, right? It's color-coded. It's pretty awesome to use. Once you learn how to use it, it's tough at the beginning because there's a lot of buttons and a lot of functionality, but once you learn how to use it, you use it perfectly. I think the last implementation I did for it was, I think it was early last year or maybe the year before that, where it was for a company that did like Botox and stuff like that, just like treatments and facial treatments and whatnot. And they were using this thing heavily because exactly what it did is what they needed. We didn't need anything extra. It did exactly what they needed. So we decided to go for that. And, they need to start finding out a different way of doing things. Why? Because the unified interface, once again, everything connected back to that number 4, that classic interface going away. The unified interface has a new scheduling experience, which is, by the way, built on top of the Universal Resource Scheduling, URS, and you probably have heard this before when it comes to field service, for example. But the new scheduling experience, which is built on top of URS, is used on the unified interface. So if you're using the old school classic service scheduling, it is going to be there for now, I guess, until the classic interface goes away. But then after that, what are you going to do? Once it's gone forever, what are you going to do? Right? So you want to start converting things now. Maybe take the break during the Christmas break in December to, do something. So you have 5 months between now and December that you can start transforming things, at least start playing with the new scheduling experience on the unified interface. Again, you can only play tough for so long. And I hear many customers saying like, well, we didn't budget it for this. When we implemented Dynamics 2 years ago, we didn't know this was happening. So we invested $100,000 in it. But what are you going to do? It's going to go away, whether you like it or not. And I've had this conversation with customers on the last couple of months when we were talking about, how much it would cost for them to transfer everything to the unified interface. And the fact that they spend $100,000, $200,000 on development work and iframes and custom things for their forms, and now they're not going to work in the unified interface. Well, when I implemented, I didn't know that this was okay. Cool, but what are we going to do? Are we going to just quit, not use this thing, or we're going to say we're going to use it till 2020, and then what? What are you going to do? Are you going to go to Salesforce, or are you going to go and pay triple for the same functionality? And you still have to set it up. You still have to pay for it. I mean, it's not like the system is going to transfer. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're stuck. This is work that needs to be done. Well, we need to be is proactive and avoid having to rush through this. Because if you're going to wait and then have to rush, well, guess what? There's a bunch of other people that are going to try to rush. And there's just not enough pros out there and partners out there that are going to be able to do this before it's gone forever. And I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of people, even people listening to this, which are going to wait until the April release in 2020 when Microsoft says, hey, by the way, here's the list of things. Just to remind you, here's a list of things that are going to go away in 6 months. And everybody's going to freak out and reach out to their partners and say, oh, we need to put together a project for this. We need to do something about it. Well, yes, you and the other 43,000 organizations out there that also need to transfer that waited until the last second. And I fully realize that a lot of companies out there haven't budgeted for this thing, that they're going to put it on the budget for next year, for 2020. If you do that, you need to start working with your partner right now to put together proposals, whatever it is that you need to line up and start this thing in January. You need to start immediately. So yes, the budget is not coming until 2020. Cool. Now you're going to seek that proposal, whatever it is that you need to get that budget approved. That's awesome. But as soon as it's approved, start. Don't wait till June or July to start the work. Right? Just get it done. Be proactive about it. And I think if the theme of this episode is about being proactive, which I think we can say that for all of our list, or maybe the vast majority of them, maybe the first one that I talked about, leads, you already are using that, and obviously they're not going away. So it's not really about being proactive there. It's more about being mindful of not using more complexity than what you need. But if there's something that all of these have in common, it's being proactive. And I think that on that same theme, number 10, to close the episode, is all about being proactive. And that is, you need to replace Dynamics 365 on-premise. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of you saw this one coming. It was on the list. And I think that if you're still using Dynamics 365 or Dynamics CRM, because some people are still on 2016 and before that, if you're still using Dynamics CRM on-premise, you need to replace it. You need to start looking for what is it that needs to be done in order to go to the cloud. Now, if I knew that Microsoft was getting rid of on-premise, if I knew that, I couldn't tell you that. It wouldn't be on the list because I would be under NDA and unable to share that. But as of now, as far as I know, Microsoft is planning to keep on going with on-premise and online. I don't have to tell you if I agree or not with that decision. I think you guys know that one of the proponents of getting rid of on-premise I've been for years. I think that we would be able to innovate, and by we I mean Microsoft and the community and the entire Dynamics 365 and perhaps even business application space will be able to innovate and improve way faster, right? It's one of the things that companies that are cloud only have as an advantage on top of us. Now, obviously, we do have on-premise as an advantage on top of them. So it kind of comes and goes. There's pros and cons to it. But I believe that if you look at the track record of Microsoft over the last few years and how hard it is to justify being on-premise, I believe that this is the writing is on the wall. I believe that you need to be proactive about this and get out of on-premise while you still can plan for it, budget for it, do it right, and make the switch. Now, we recorded 2 episodes about moving to online from on-premise. There's a process for that. You have to make decisions along the way, whether this is a good time for you to innovate and take a look at your on-premise solution and decide if you just want to move to the cloud, or decide if you want to, as making the move, if you want to analyze your processes, analyze your customizations, everything you have, and whether it makes sense to, redeploy in a way, redo those customizations maybe with out-of-the-box functionality. Maybe you have a bunch of plugins and code that calculated fields and roll-up fields and business rules can do now. So you have to make that decision, and Obviously, the partner that you're working with should be capable of helping you with that. If not, maybe yourself, you can do that self-assessment and decide what it is. But not only converting functionality that you already have. I think that that's a big part of moving to the cloud. But also, there's a big advantage of going to the cloud, which is access to functionality you don't have on premise, right? Maybe now you'll be able to use that LinkedIn Sales Navigator integration. Maybe now you'll be able to use relationship insights. Maybe now you'll be able to use, again, features and connectivity and integrations to Power Apps and Flow and things that you just couldn't do before. Leverage Azure in a different way, right? So we know that that needs to be part of the migration plan. And your migration plan will probably have multiple phases. But is this a phase 1 thing, a phase 2 thing? You have to spend time making these decisions. And I think that it is time that you start looking into making these decisions, because I think the writing is on the wall. Well, do I think they're going to get rid of it soon or whatever within the next year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever? No, probably not, because, I think I would die of happiness if it happened. So I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but I don't think it's going to get easier to be an on-premise customer. I mean, I think that looking at the fact that functionality gets released online up to a year and a half, sometimes never, by the way, it gets released on premise. It's just an online only feature and that's it, right? But the fact that the functionality that goes on premise comes out a year and a half, 2 years after it comes out online, the fact that licensing has been changing, so now it costs pretty much the same or more to be on premise than to be online. The fact that, there's a lot of advantage to being on an Azure-based architecture rather than having to support it yourself and deal with all the security implications and disaster recovery implications and dealing with performance and all of that stuff. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on to justify being online rather than being on premise. And I just don't think that list is going to get smaller. I don't think it's going to get easier to justify being on premise. And I know that some of you out there work for companies that would love to be online, but you can't because of compliance reasons or the laws in your country, or maybe you don't have a data center in your country and you want to be online, but you can't have the data outside of your country. I get that. There are difficulties for a lot of people out there, but I think it's only a matter of time until it becomes unbearable to be on premise. I think that is only a matter of time until being online makes 100% of the sense and being on-premise makes no sense. And I know there are companies out there that are preparing for, should I upgrade? Should I, just upgrade my on-premise to the latest version or whatever it is? I think that if you're going to make the investment and spend the time and money, I think you should go to the cloud. So that is it for this episode of the top 10 things you need to replace in Dynamics 365. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to, again, subscribe to our podcast. We've been getting a lot of huge numbers, almost every episode, 1,000 downloads. So thank you so much, guys, for tuning in to the show and sending me questions and comments about it. I'm looking forward to your comments about this one as well and to see you on the next episode. If you have any questions, email us at info@crmmvppodcast.com.